I always like to say magic can happen on Monday nights. Let's go around the horn. Cynthia, did you get any fantasy sorcery from that game between the Saints and the Raiders?
I wish that I could have. I wanted to get some action in that, but unfortunately, all my players had already gone. But I did end up winning. So it ends, all's well that ends well.
Way to rub it in, Cynthia. I needed 10 fantasy points from the Saints defense last night, and they couldn't do it, so I lost. It was kind of a bummer.
See, I was playing with house money, so it wasn't a big deal for me, but I told our own social Emily to start Traquan Smith against the fantasy footballers. Oh, how you doing, fantasy footballers? You're now 0-2.
Ooh, that hurts. I play in a league where you get bonuses for being the high scorer of the week, and so Alvin Kamara helped put me over the top in that respect. So big ups to AK and the Saints offense for at least getting that done for me. So that brings us to our waiver wire wonders. We're going to talk about which fantasy free agents will be a thing come tomorrow in your leagues. Rank, start us off.
Well, I'm going to be looking at Myles Gaskin, who will be playing Thursday night here, right on NFL Network on Thursday Night Football. He's available in 99% of leagues, and one of the things that we've seen over the past couple of games, or the two, 13 touches in both games. He's usurped both Matt Breida and Jordan Howard as the lead back, playing 62% of the snaps. And I know there's a lot of short-term fixes in the waiver wire this week, but I kind of like going long-term and thinking of a guy who could end up being a guy that you use the entire season.
I don't know if I'm going to use him the entire season, but I'm looking at Darrell Henderson, who's available in 68% of NFL.com leagues. I think it's interesting. Don't overestimate what happened against Philadelphia with those 121 scrimmage yards and the rushing touchdowns, 14 touches. I do think Malcolm Brown with his finger, Cam Akers with his rib. I think the opportunity against Buffalo, especially to keep that run game strong, to keep Jared Goff and the play action going well, is going to be really important this week. So this is maybe a stopgap solution, maybe one in the future, but definitely one worth picking up and considering later.
Sean McVay going with that Kyle Shanahan style in his backfield. Speaking of Shanahan, Jerick McKinnon looks like he's going to get a whole lot of run for the 49ers this week. Touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. He really had outplayed Tevin Coleman before Coleman even got hurt. Now I look for that workload to go up because of so many injuries in that backfield, including Raheem Mostert. We'll see if George Kittle returns because that should change some things in the offense, but I still do expect that McKinnon will get a whole lot of opportunity.
McKinnon is a huge name on the waiver wire this week, but so is Laviska Shenault Jr. Now, later in the show, I'm going to get to the reason why I love this Jaguars defense so much. But before that, please help me get you hyped about Laviska Shenault. He is available in 99% of NFL.com leagues and should be a main target on this week's waiver wire. His snaps, his touches, and his yards increased in week 2, rushing for 37 yards and catching 3 receptions for 35 yards against the Titans. Between Shenault and DJ Chark, the Jag receiving corps ain't looking so shabby.
Yeah, that Shenault buzz has been getting louder week after week. I've been on the train for a while now. We didn't mention Mike Davis's name in that group, and he's the guy who's going to be the next man up in Carolina because Christian McCaffrey is gone for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So real quick, let's go around the horn, starting with you, Cynthia, or I start with you, Adam Rank. Who are your top 3 waiver wire picks in order this week?
Well, I'm going to go with Joshua Kelly because I believe he's going to have a role with the LA Chargers, similar to what, Melvin Gordon was doing last season. And I have also got Mike Davis, of course, if you've got CMC, and Myles Gaskin would be my third guy.
I love it. All 3 great additions, but my 3, it's one that Cynthia mentioned earlier. It's Darrell Henderson, running back for the Los Angeles Rams. My second guy is James Robinson. Again, I love so much of this Jaguars offense. And then third, at the tight end position, I have Dalton Schultz, the new tight end for the Dallas Cowboys.
I like those, and I also like Mike Davis is my number 1. Jerick McKinnon is my number 2, and then Gardner Minshew, number 3. You may need a quarterback. There's some interesting things going on at the position, like if you mistakenly took Carson Wentz, so consider Gardner Minshew.
Well, I talked about Jerick McKinnon earlier. He's my number 1 guy. I've got Mike Davis coming in at number 2. And I'm with Cynthia. Gardner Minshew. You will see him on Thursday night here on NFL Network. I like him as the third waiver wire option this week. So if we are adding people, that means generally we've got to let somebody go. So who are you making waves with this week, Cynthia?
Well, unfortunately, I listened to Adam Rank because he is super smart, and unfortunately for Matt Breida, see you later. You're off my team. Less than 5 fantasy points in weeks 1 and 2, 6.5 touches per game. Blech, that's tied for 60th. You fired 23% of snaps, off my team.
Well, I'm looking at Rob Gronkowski, and maybe it was a little bit of wish casting for us to think that he could be a top 12 tight end. He's pretty much a blocking tight end now. He's good at it. That just doesn't get you any fantasy points. He's played 90 snaps this year, run just 19 routes, less than 6% target share, in a passing game that's still sort of trying to work out the bugs there. So I think in the meantime, Gronk can go back on the waiver wire in most leagues.
Gronk's back on the waiver wire. Maybe he's going to go back to retirement and throw more parties, but I'm looking at Jarvis Landry with the Cleveland Browns. And we were all hoping that this was going to be a Browns comeback season where Baker Mayfield can get it together so that Jarvis and OBJ could shine. Now, though OBJ got into the end zone and the Browns win over the Bengals last week, Landry still hasn't seen the proper work for me to keep him around. The Browns have been having a low-volume passing attack, which doesn't bode well for a fantasy player like Landry. Now, he does have much more of a favorable matchup against the Washington football team this week, but I'm done taking my chances. You are out of my lineup.
The player that I'm going to be dropping this week is Bryce Love. And you know what? I know he's available in 0.8% of NFL.com leagues. That's me. I'm the guy who picked him. And you know what? And this is one of the things, Cynthia and I will apologize for this. I draft rando running backs. It's one of my strategies. I took Breida. I took Bryce Love. I'm dropping them. Oh, but I also drafted James Robinson, who I'm probably going to keep. But it's a strategy. This is why you pick these guys. Sometimes they burn you. And you got to do what you got to do. Although once I drop Bryce Love, he's going to go out there and get 40 points.
Where is the love? Love don't live here anymore. Fantasy Twitter is sitting on so many puns that we haven't had a chance to use just yet. So we need Bryce Love to come back into our lives at some point. All right, time to mix your popcorn and your M&Ms. Get ready for this Overreaction Theater matinee. Week 1 had us freaking out in one direction. Week 2 has us tilting the complete other way. So, hey, let's overreact. Rank Dak Prescott. He will break LaDainian Tomlinson's single-season record of rushing touchdowns with 28, right?
Oh, Marcus, settle down. He's not going to do this again. Yes, he scored 3 rushing touchdowns in that comeback against the Atlanta Falcons. And yes, he was the first player in NFL history to throw for more than 400 yards in a game and also rush for 3 touchdowns. But I do believe at some point he's going to be dispersing those scores to guys like Michael Gallup, maybe, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, maybe Zeke. Have you heard of him? So it's cool. It's great. I still believe that Dak could end up being the QB1 this season. I'm just not so sure he's going to end up with 28 rushing touchdowns. Settle down.
I mean, fantasy managers got a bonus. They got those extra 2 points for those rushing touchdowns instead of the passing touchdowns. All right, Cynthia, Cam Newton will rush for more touchdowns than he passes for this season.
Okay, that's really funny. I get that he's tied for number 1 in the NFL with 4 rushing touchdowns, and he is the current record holder with 14. That's back in 2011 when he also had 21 passing touchdowns. So look to see those usual Patriots tricks, meaning in October, we actually see what their offense looks like. So maybe he'll get a bunch in September, but I think we're going to see more passing Cam going forward.
All right, Kimmy, provided his arm doesn't fall off for throwing the ball 11 times every week, Joe Burrow's going to score 20-plus fantasy points in each game from here on out.
Why not? I absolutely love this. He was the dean of college football. He broke some college records. Now it's time to break some NFL records while he's at it. He finished week 2 as a top 12 fantasy quarterback for the 2nd time in a row, and that's not stopping anytime soon. He absolutely has the opportunity to go and score 20-plus fantasy points in every single game from here on out. Burrow is the first rookie in the Super Bowl era with 60-plus pass attempts and 0 interceptions in a game. Now, the only 20-plus fantasy point in games by a rookie quarterback in a single season was Cam Newton in 2011 with 9 games. Joe Burrow, shatter that record.
Look, he looked pretty good against the Browns last Thursday night. For me, it's Josh Allen is going to break Peyton Manning's single-season yardage record. I mean, this is a guy that didn't have a 300-yard passing game all last season. He's gone 300 and then 400 in the first 2 weeks. Okay, look, the yardage totals are going to come down, but there is some positives there. They're spreading the field out. The Bills are running 10 personnel. That's no tight ends, 4 wide receivers, more than any other team in the league. So that means they are trusting Josh Allen to throw the football, and at least last week, that deep ball looked a lot better. So maybe things are starting to turn for Josh Allen as a passer. All right. Those were the blockbusters from last week. Now it's time to look at the tearjerkers. Who's going to bring us some sadness from here on out? Adam, Michael Gallup. He will never, ever be featured in the Dallas Cowboys offense ever again.
Oh, my gosh, Marcus. What I just told you a moment ago, that good things are going to happen to this team at some point. And, I mean, obviously it happened in the second half against the Falcons. But I really do believe there is enough targets to be distributed in this offense. We thought about it when CeeDee Lamb joined this team, that he was replacing Jason Witten and Randall Cobb, who had 177 targets the previous year. So at some point, all three of these guys in the passing attack were going to be featured. Just relax. Just have a little bit of patience. Michael Gallup is going to be just fine. He's got a great matchup this week against Seattle. We saw what the Patriots were able to do to them. So just chill out, Marcus. Stop overreacting.
I still believe in Michael Gallup. I've been there all year long. All right, Cynthia, I feel like we hear this song every year. Julio Jones, he's just going to be a flex at best. I mean, his best days are behind him, right?
Sure. If anyone believes that, please engage in a trade with me, and I will, give you someone that I believe is a flex. So let's do that. I know that Calvin Ridley has, 4 touchdowns, 2 per game, past 2 games. But this is still Julio Jones we're talking about. This is the guy who's had 1,200-plus receiving yards in 6 straight seasons, making him the top 7 fantasy wideout in all 6 of those seasons. So enough. Or actually, maybe I should sell it that, yes, he's a flex at best, and then you can come trade me for him. I'll take that trade.
I think a lot of people will try to get to the front of that line if Julio Jones was available in fantasy leagues. All right, Kimmy, Darius Slayton, he's going to fill the touchdown shoes of Saquon Barkley for Big Blue.
Let's pump the brakes on that one. Now, obviously, it's an unfortunate loss of losing Saquon Barkley, which means that the Giants offense now needs to step it up if they want to win games, but I don't think the step up is going to come from Darius Slayton. Though Slayton is right behind Saquon Barkley in scrimmage touchdowns, Saquon leaves big shoes to fill. Slayton will be needed against the 49ers this week, but don't be surprised if he doesn't put up huge fantasy numbers. Instead, I see Evan Ingram stepping up as the main receiver in an offense that keeps taking hits, though Slayton could have some upside. However, let's see what week 3 brings, and then let's go from there.
Hey, Darius Slayton and Daniel Jones seem to have a connection. There is some positives there. I'm saying T.Y. Hilton won't be a top 75 fantasy receiver this year. All right, I mean, it won't be that bad, but there are some concerns there. Right now, Phillip Rivers and T.Y. Hilton have had problems connecting on those intermediate and deep routes. The upside there is that Hilton's air yards per attempt have been better with Rivers than they were last year with Jacoby Brissett. But if they can't figure out how to get some of those big throws connected down the field, that short passing game does not bode well for T.Y. Hilton's fantasy prospects. By the way, if you enjoy us freaking out over every little fantasy thing that happens, you will enjoy the NFL Fantasy Football Show. It streams Monday and Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can find it on NFL.com, in the NFL Fantasy app, and on YouTube at youtube.com/NFL Fantasy Football. Let's turn to the latest news headlines in case you missed it. NFL Network's Mike Garafolo is reporting that the Giants are expected to sign running back Devontae Freeman to help replace Saquon Barkley, who will miss the rest of the season on injured reserve with that torn ACL. Kimmy, how you feeling about Devontae in New York?
Well, I just kind of shaded Darius Slayton, saying I don't think he could fill those shoes, but now maybe it's time for Devonta Freeman to do that. If you look at this Jason Garrett offense, there are obvious holes that Freeman can fit into. One of those being pass catching. Another obvious one will clearly be the run game. However, do not expect Freeman to take on all of Barkley's snaps from the jump. I see Freeman and Dion Lewis doing a 50-50 split with Gallman occasionally popping in, but regardless, Devonta Freeman, another name to look at on the waiver wire.
Next couple weeks, the schedule is not great. It starts to lighten up, though, a couple weeks down the road. The Colts have placed Paris Campbell on injured reserve with a PCL injury. Campbell was a hot name this fantasy draft season, with Phillip Rivers now in Indy. He was second on the team in targets with 9 behind T.Y. Hilton. So, Rank, who benefits the most when it comes to the Colts pass catching?
Well, last week we were talking about Mo Alley-Cox stepping up and taking a bigger role in this offense, and we saw it on Sunday. He scored more than 16 fantasy points. He was the most targeted receiver. He led the team in receptions, receiving yards against the Vikings. He finished with 111 receiving yards, which is great. And we really looked at this matchup against the Jets, who last week just allowed Jordan Reed to reinvent himself. So I think if you have an opportunity and you need to replace somebody, you need to replace a tight end on the waiver wire, this is somebody you need to be targeting this week.
And we know Phillip Rivers does love throwing to his tight ends. NFL Network's Tom Pelissero says an MRI confirms that Niners running back Raheem Mostert has an MCL sprain, but there's optimism it won't lead to an extended absence, according to a source. Mostert is expected to miss this week's game at the Giants. We talked about how Jerick McKinnon's waiver wire value obviously goes up. Interesting times ahead in the Niners backfield. Our own Ian Rappaport says Niners quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo is a long shot to play Sunday at the Giants with that injured ankle, so rank if he can't go. We know you're not starting Nick Mullins in traditional fantasy leagues, but maybe in deeper leagues or in dailies, would you take a look at him?
No. What are we doing? No. There's plenty of quarterbacks out there we can look at. Gardner Minshew, you mentioned earlier, even Phillip Rivers. I've got a list of guys that we can go out at some point and talk about later on during the show. But yeah, this is one like, that's fine. Play the 49ers running back, whichever one you fancy, and go with it that way.
Yeah, and hopefully George Kittle is back in the offense as well this week. With no Drew Lock for the next 3 to 5 weeks, the Broncos are signing quarterback Blake Bortles to a one-year deal. Bortles finished 2 seasons as a top 13 QB back in 2016 and 2017. Now, off the bench, Jeff Driscoll was your QB 16 this week with 18.74 points, just over 3/4 of action against the Steelers. So, Cynthia, for deeper leagues and for the daily fantasy folks, how do you have the Broncos quarterback projected this week against the Buccaneers?
This isn't a bad projection considering it's a Todd Bowles defense, and Todd Bowles is really good at stopping the run, which is where Jeff Driscoll gets you those fantasy points, and also he's really effective. Like when you saw with Detroit last season, he averaged 50.3 rushing yards per game. That was helpful for Detroit. However, Todd Bowles on low starts, so people with not a ton of starts, it is not a good matchup, especially for someone who relies on the run.
Start to the Raiders' Las Vegas residency on Monday night. Now we got our recap in primetime and our off-peak performances. Starting with the showstoppers in Vegas. Kimmy, who was on the marquee last night?
Look at that guy right there. It's Alvin Kamara. Now, with the consensus number 2 and number 1 fantasy running backs riddled with injury this week, it was nice to see another consensus first-rounder show out and stay healthy. Alvin Kamara, and absolutely no surprise, he lit up the Las Vegas Raiders with 13 rushing attempts for 79 yards and 2 touchdowns, on top of 9 receptions for 95 yards. That performance got him 38.4 fantasy points, and most likely, like you, Marcus, got his fantasy managers a win.
You know who I'm looking at? Darren Waller, who Bill Belichick just said, we haven't seen a guy like this in quite some time. I don't know if I got the quote exactly right, but I think that means good things, especially because he probably watched him last night. 16 targets, 12 receptions, just that many. And that amazing touchdown where he bodied his way into the end zone, just a wrecking ball all the way down to score the touchdown.
Raiders let the Walrus eat last night. Adam Rank, start us off on guys who feel like they might get pushed to the lounge now.
Oh, yeah. You know what? There was a time where Las Vegas hosted people who are a little bit past their prime, and now you see Lady Gaga out there, and it's for primetime performers. Yeah, Drew Brees, that isn't you. You need to go to like Omaha or that place in Missouri, Branson. Like, what is it? Like, you're not Vegas anymore. I'm so sorry. And no disrespect. You're going to the Hall of Fame. I think you're a great player. But what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, he's had fewer than 15 fantasy points in both games. It's very reminiscent of when Peyton Manning, kind of lucked his way to a Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos a couple of years ago. It might be Taysom Hill time. Like, I don't know. Or Jameis Winston, somebody come in. Like, what needs to happen? But it is it's unsettling what we're seeing here.
Yeah, absolutely unsettling. I would say anybody who started Emmanuel Sanders on Monday night probably felt like they lost the game with 3-card Monty on the sidewalk. 3 targets, 1 catch, just 18 yards for Emmanuel Sanders. That New Orleans passing game just looked absolutely flat without Michael Thomas involved. And it looks like right now, if you want a piece of the Saints passing game, Alvin Kamara and Traquan Smith might be your best bet. I know a lot of folks went that Traquan Smith route. They ended up with some pretty decent numbers to sort of help them out. All right, next up in prime time, it's the Dolphins versus the Jaguars. It's Fitzmagic versus Minshew Mania. It's beards versus mustaches. Thursday night football coming up 8 p.m. Eastern on NFL Network. All right, time now for Sweat or No Sweat. We are going to profile some of the tougher matchups from week 3. Let you know if you should be a little bit nervous. So, Kimmy, first up, Matt Ryan versus the Chicago Bears. They're giving up 11.96 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the last 4 games. So, Kimmy, sweat or no sweat on Matty Ice?
You know what? I'm not sweating this one, but let me start by saying that I understand that the Falcons will be the toughest test for the Bears defense, who've only had to face the Lions and the Giants. However, I'm still not worried about Matt Ryan going out and having a day. He's had over 23-plus fantasy points in both games this season, paired with 270-plus passing yards and 2-plus passing touchdowns. The Falcons are going to throw the ball to their receivers, and Ryan will continue to rack up those fantasy points.
Yeah, Matt Ryan's been on fire to start the season this year. Adam Rank, how about Tyreek Hill at Baltimore, giving up 23.23 fantasy points to wide receivers over the last 4 games? You were sweating Tyreek Hill last week. Are you sweating him this week?
Oh, I'm not making that mistake again. Listen, for most of the game, I'm sitting there looking like a genius. Thankfully, I had the wherewithal not to go onto Twitter and brag about it, like, where's he at? And then I was like, on this play right here, I'm like, please touch him down so I can go back and go after these people. But no. Okay, listen, fine. This is what Tyreek Hill has, what he can do every time he's on the field. So obviously you're starting him. I'm still not starting him in daily. So no, I'm not sweating this.
All right. Twitter's going to come after you anyway. I'll finish with Jonnu Smith against the Vikings, giving up just over 6 fantasy points per game to tight ends in the last 4 games. Look, I'm saying no sweat. You look at your fantasy scoring leaders, Jonnu Smith is your tight end 3 right now. He's playing 80% of the snaps, targeted on about 1/3 of his routes. And Adam Rank talked about Mo Alley Cox earlier in the show. He gashed this Minnesota defense. I would think that the Titans are going to look at Jonnu Smith quite a bit. And I think he's going to have a pretty good week for Tennessee and for your fantasy squad.
Time for my 5. Now, after 2 weeks of fantasy football, now it's time to tell you who are the 5 guys that are must-starts for the rest of the season. Let's kick it off at the number 5 spot. It's a rookie who, when his head coach said he was going in, he thought he heard him wrong. It's Justin Herbert. Now, when it's time for him to take the field as the team starter, you're going to want to get him into your fantasy lineup if you were unable to grab a top quarterback. Herbert's debut had him completing 22 out of 31 passes. It was all magic. Next up is Tyler Boyd. Now, there is big hope all offseason that bringing in Joe Burrow could open up the field for the Bengals receivers, and we seem to be right. Boyd caught 7 of 8 targets for 72 yards and a touchdown in week 2. All right, next up at number 3, the list is getting smaller, but we're going down to Buffalo where the QB is slinging and the receivers are eating. It's time for John Brown. John Brown posted up with 82 yards and a score in week 2, his 2nd touchdown of the season. Defenses will now start to want to play man against Stephon Diggs, opening up all the opportunity for Brown. So make sure you get him into your lineup. Next up, number 2. Tight ends can sometimes be a headache in fantasy football, which is why grabbing a good one matters. Let's go ahead and grab Mike Gesicki for Miami. He showed up in a big way last Sunday, turning his 11 targets into 8 receptions for 129 yards and a fun little prance into the end zone. With Preston Williams struggling and no one behind Devontae Parker stepping up, Mike Gesicki looks to be one of the main receivers in that offense. All right, guys, it's time for that number 1 spot. I'm a part of the Minshew Mania. No shade over here. I'm all about the mustache. On Sunday, he had 339 yards in 1, 2, 3 touchdowns. Minshew has now thrown 6 touchdown passes and 512 passing yards over the first 2 weeks, showing that he's got the arm and the volume you want as a fantasy quarterback. All about the mustache. Good luck, Gardner Minshew. And those were my 5 must-start players for the rest of the season.
Takes the handoff. Josh Allen takes a long look downfield, going deep again. He's got a man wide open. John Brown, he makes the catch. Touchdown! Touchdown, Buffalo! John Brown from Josh Allen.
What a throw. 4 touchdowns. 0 picks. 400 yards in the air. Take that.
I heard Josh Allen can throw the ball a quarter mile. That brings us higher or lower with Cynthia Freeland. It's time for me to get my Bob Barker on and ask Cynthia to help control the pet population. Wait, no, that's not right. We're actually going to talk projections for some players this week, and Cynthia is going to tell us whether they will end up being higher or lower. So we will start with the aforementioned Josh Allen. Over 400 yards on Sunday, over 300 yards in week 1. So higher or lower than 275 passing yards versus the Rams this week?
It's lower. It's 218 passing yards, a touchdown, an interception, and 48 rush yards because it's the Rams. Not because Josh Allen's going to have a bad game, but this one's going to be delivered on the ground. Aaron Donald will probably get off the bus, which is what Brian Daboll said was the best way to stop Aaron Donald. Was maybe he misses the bus, but I think he's going to be there. So the run game will provide a nice outlet for Josh Allen.
The Bills have had a higher pass volume the first couple weeks than people have expected. Next up, Kyler Murray averaging 79 yards per game on the ground, higher or lower than 80 rush yards Sunday against the Lions?
Ooh, I have lower here too. So 245 passing, 2 passing touchdowns, which would be the first time this season, and only 69, a measly 69 rushing yards in this one. Yes, the Lions are very susceptible to the run, but I think that this means a Kenyon Drake sort of situation. I'm boosting him in my projections, and Kyler keeping it a little bit more protected. Let's keep him healthy. This is a probable playoff team.
Through 2 weeks, he's on pace to break Lamar Jackson's single-season quarterback rushing record. All right, how about Russell Wilson? The Seahawks have let Russ cook. He's averaging 4.5 touchdowns a game this season. So higher or lower than 2.5 passing touchdowns against the Cowboys?
I have three passing touchdowns, 264 passing yards, an interception, and 34 rush yards. Marcus, we've been working together now for, 4 years? You rarely see in any of my projections a 3-touchdown situation, but that's how special Russell Wilson is. And it also reflects the fact that Dallas is really susceptible to the pass. So the game script for me, a lot of points in this one and through the air.
When you said that, I heard the count from Sesame Street. 3! Patrick Mahomes facing a stingy Ravens secondary, giving up just 232 passing yards per game. So higher or lower than 270 passing yards for Patty Mahomes this week?
I have higher, 277 and 1, 2, 3 touchdowns. Okay, your count is way better than mine. And 44 rush yards in this one. This reflects a game script that we'll probably talk about in other days, when we play this game on other days this week. But I think Patrick Mahomes has a nice, deep situation going on, Tyreek Hill, and we see, we're about to see a deep pass right there. I think that's going to be the game script in this one.
All right, Leonard Fournette is facing the Broncos, who gave up 121 and 131 scrimmage yards to James Conner, Derrick Henry. Higher or lower than 73 scrimmage yards for Leonard Fournette?
It might be my favorite time in this entire segment. Draw that star. I have exactly 73 scrimmage yards in this one, 51 on the ground, and 22 through the air with 3 receptions. Yes, he had 116 scrimmage yards in week 2. However, let's kind of moderate that here. Denver, they've got a bunch of injuries too, so we've got to try to factor in all of these things and mix up the run looks. It's not just going to be him this time.
All right, finally, Calvin Ridley, who's been a touchdown machine. He's had 2 a week this season. So, Cynthia, we're just going to set it at 2. Higher or lower for Calvin Ridley against the Chicago Bears?
Okay, so in a nod back all the way to the beginning of the segment, lower than 2 touchdowns. I have 677 and only 1 touchdown. Guess how many touchdowns Chicago has allowed to wide receivers so far this season? The answer is 0. I think this is going to be one where, of course, Matty Ice is going to have a great game, but they're going to mix up the looks. They still got Julio Jones. I'm still riding hard for my man Julio.
Welcome back to NFL Fantasy Live, and time for Breaking the Ranks. And today, I will give you the top 5 quarterbacks you should be starting over Tom Brady. And don't disrespect to Tom. He's new to town. He's probably still got to use Google Maps to find the Whole Foods. But we start at number 5 in Phillip Rivers. And it seems like every time Phillip Rivers has a great matchup, it ends in disappointment, like every time they make a new Superman movie, although Man of Steel was kind of dope. But the Jets have allowed 2 passing touchdowns in every game this season. Number 4, Joe Burrow. Zach Taylor wants to give him, 100 attempts a game, and I want to get him into my lineup just for that reason. Now, he's playing the Eagles, who have allowed 4 passing touchdowns this season with no interceptions created. Number 3, Baker Mayfield. Sometimes when you're feeling bad, you play bad non-rookie, you put up 70. In the NFL, that's called playing the Bengals. So now that he's got some momentum, he's going up against the football team, who've allowed the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. Number 2, Ryan Tannehill. Look, man, at some point, Laney Boggs goes back to being a nerd, and that could happen to Tannehill at any point. Just not this week against the Minnesota Vikings, who've allowed 5 passing touchdowns this season. And number 1, it's Gardner Minshew. Look, the stash plays. Boomer Fitzpatrick out there calling him out for having a patchy beard. Have you not seen the beard on Gardner Minshew when he chooses to grow one? No, he rocks a mustache because he's a guy who goes out there who throws 3 touchdown passes in every game this season. Just look at those numbers. And that was Breaking the Ranks. 5 quarterbacks I would start over Tom Brady. Lay out.
By the way, Tom Brady didn't go to Whole Foods. Whole Foods goes to Tom Brady. We are looking at some running back committee conundrums, some backfields that have left fantasy managers disgruntled through the first 2 weeks. So we'll try to get you back on the gruntled side of things and let you know which guy to target. We will start in Baltimore. We've got Mark Ingram. We've got J.K. Dobbins. Adam Rank, please help us solve this one.
You know what? If I'm going to be looking at this long term, I think it's going to eventually be J.K. Dobbins. Now, obviously, Mark Ingram had the most fantasy points last week because he had that 30-yard touchdown run. But Gus Edwards actually had more more attempts, and Lamar Jackson had more opportunity. It's just a muddled mess, and I just feel like it's J.K. Dobbins eventually to take.
Yeah, it's just frustrating right now to deal with, no doubt. Cynthia, the conundrum in the Buffalo backfield. I want to like Devin Singletary. It just feels like the Bills aren't that into him. So Devin Singletary or Zach Moss?
I'm going with Zach Moss. I love opportunities on the goal line where he has 100% of them, and Devin Singletary, unfortunately, has 0. And also Zach Moss, 61% of the red zone opportunities. Same thing, Devin Singletary, only 34. Right now, this week, against the Rams, I would go Devin Singletary over Moss, but long term, it is Moss.
Yeah, I think Moss has that touchdown upside, which helps when the team's throwing the ball as much as they have. All right, finally, Kimmy, we're going to spin the wheel of Rams running backs, Malcolm Brown or Darrell Henderson. Which way are you going?
This is kind of going to be one of those this helps no one picks, because I really do think that the two of them are going to split time. Basically, what we saw on Sunday was that Cam Akers, he was out dealing with a rib injury. Malcolm Brown, he got nicked up with a finger. So then came Darrell Henderson, right? This just goes to show the Rams have interchangeable running backs all ready to go and take steps and take the reins and step up at just a moment's notice. So I do expect Brown and Henderson to split carries. I know that kind of doesn't give a lot of answers for fantasy managers. That's just, it is what it is. It's a crowded backfield. It's a mess.
You know, sometimes in these situations, the answer is no one. I think in the Rams case, it might be everybody, just because I think everybody's going to get their shot at some point in this backfield this year. Somewhere between magic and science, they used to call it alchemy. We call it next-gen stats. Here's this next-gen nugget for you. Ben Roethlisberger's 84-yard touchdown pass to rookie Chase Claypool had a completion probability of just 18.3%. It's the second least probable completion for Roethlisberger since 2018. And more evidence that it looks like Big Ben is back in Pittsburgh. He threw for 311 yards and 2 touchdown passes on the season, giving him 5 for the year. All right, it is week 3 flex time. We're going to allow, or hopefully you allow us to help you ease your mind when it comes to your flex spot this week. Kimmy, start us off on your favorite flex starts.
I'm flexing. I want to talk about, can you guys see these guns? I want to talk about Joshua Kelly, the Los Angeles Charger. Now, the first 2 games of the season have gone to show that the rookie Joshua Kelly is on the same footing in the Chargers backfield as Austin Eckler. Kelly had 35 carries through the first 2 weeks, including a team-high 23 carries for 64 yards and 2 catches for 49 yards against the Chiefs. The Chargers look to continue to have a 2-headed backfield with Eckler and Kelly leading the charge, and Kelly's looking to skyrocket in value, especially this week against the team that he's playing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I believe that he can be a RB2 this week, and I love CeeDee Lamb going up against the Seattle Seahawks. We saw last week his targets, his receiving yards, and his receptions all increase. He's had 7.5 targets per game this year. That's second on the team. That is one of the reasons why a lot of people who've drafted Michael Gallup have started to panic. But I really look at this Cowboys offense to feast this week. Seattle's allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. We saw Julian Edelman get loose on Sunday night. So CeeDee Lamb is going to be a great option.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb has been like a lion so far the first couple weeks of the season. DeAndre Swift, speaking of the Lions, I know that backfield situation has been not so great to start the year, but Swift is the pass-catching back of choice for this offense, and I think the game script's going to come into play this week against an Arizona offense that is scoring like crazy. It's going to force Detroit to play fast, to throw the football, to try and stay in this game, and I think that's going to help DeAndre Swift have one of his better fantasy weeks of the season. All right, one more again. We're going around. Kimmy, who you got?
All right, well, we always question, why did the Jaguars get rid of Leonard Fournette? Guys, it's because of this guy right here. It's James Robinson, the undrafted free agent, 102 yards on 16 carries, also catching 3 passes for 18 yards and getting his first ever NFL touchdown. Not only is he productive in the run game, but also in the passing game. Favorable matchup against the Miami Dolphins. Get him in your lineup and thank me later.
You know what? I have a dynasty team that's going to be starting James Robinson, And this guy, Myles Gaskin, yes, I'm putting all my eggs into the Thursday night game. Want to see a lot of running. But again, we talked about this at the top of the show, is that this is a player that is getting a lot of opportunity. And we see this every season. There is always going to be a handful of running backs that nobody drafted. You go out, you reap the benefits. I really do think that this Dolphins offense can start to get on a roll at some point this season. And Gaskin, I'm not going to say he's going to be a league winner, but he's definitely going to help you out.
We talked about Jordan Howard and Matt Breida. It was Myles Gaskin all along. I'm looking at Corey Davis after 2 weeks. Starting to buy in that maybe this is the Corey Davis breakout season. He's looked good the first couple of weeks, picking up some slack, especially with A.J. Brown injured. This week, he's got a Vikings defense that has struggled against wide receivers to start the year, and Adam Rank pointed this out. Look, this Vikings defense is not what it once was, and maybe we can start to pick on them a little bit more. But I think Corey Davis gets some targets, and I look for him to have a pretty big week for the Titans on Sunday. Now for Call Me Crazy, but our weekly predictions that might leave some folks scratching their heads. Adam Rank, let's get weird.
Call me crazy, but Kenyon Drake is going to be the #1 running back this week. And we really love Kenyon Drake because, first of all, he embraces fantasy Twitter, just going after people who are questioning him. You love it. It's kind of like you feel like he's a part of the community, like when Olivia Munn was wearing Star Wars shirts on Attack of the Show. You're like, yeah, we're cool now. I mean, we're not. They are. But he's going up against the Detroit Lions this week that allowed Aaron Jones to be the top running back last week, so he'll do it this week.
Okay, so following that, I don't have as good of an analogy as an Olivia Munn, any of that sort of thing, but I do think James Robinson will be a top 5 running back on the week, and he has a potential for 2 touchdowns on Thursday night against Miami. I think this isn't even that crazy, maybe at all, and it's kind of crazy that both me and Adam Rank are agreeing on so many things this week, so that could be the craziest thing that we've said all day.
All right, well, I'm going to get crazy with this one. Call me crazy, but Aaron Rodgers is going to outscore Drew Brees in fantasy points this week. Earlier, you heard Adam Rank compare Drew Brees to Branson, Missouri. Well, Adam Rodgers, he's out here on his Beyonce Vegas tour. So, Aaron Rodgers, fire him up.
Call me crazy, but Kyler Murray's going to score 30-plus fantasy points for the second straight week. You saw that Cynthia had him with 2 passing touchdowns. I still think he gets one on the ground. I think he has a big day with his arm, and he continues his march to be one of the top quarterbacks in all of fantasy football. Look, it's been Kyler being fantastic. I think he's going to keep it going this week. And that will do it for this edition of NFL Fantasy Live.